His Excellency, Dr. Bambang Susantono, Head of the Indonesia New Capital City and also advisor to T20, Profesor Danang Parikesit, Ibu Sinthya, Pak Stefanus, Nicolas, he will join us later again, Pak Andre, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Fauziah and I will be chairing these sessions, and our topic is promoting sustainable investment and financing as a new approach for infrastructure development. This topic brings cross-sectoral issues, at least it includes the issues of SDGs, climate change, infrastructure development, project de-riskings, and blended finance. The issue of green financing has been discussed intensively and globally. I have some list of the positive and optimistic views, as well as not so optimistic views. On the positive side, it said that it supports inclusive growth and boosts the GDP, protects the environment, and saves us from the bigger future costs from the environmental damage. And in the challenges, perhaps, because it is said that typically green investment incurs higher upfront investment costs, while the long-term benefits may be overlooked. So it's challenging and it's quite difficult to attract private investors to invest in these types of green infrastructures, while the government funds is not enough. There are also differences of standards and implementations of sustainable finance, and in some cases it can also impact vulnerable groups. So sustainable finance could take various forms, such as green bonds, crowdfunding, philanthropy, sustainable link finance, etc. So the objective of this session is to update us with the latest progress of the sustainable finance, discuss the examples, challenges, and opportunities, and we expect to have a proposal for the recommendation to the G20 leaders. We are fortunate to have a list of prominent speakers and also the keynote speech. The keynote speech will be delivered by His Excellency Bambang Susantono, Chairman of the New Capital Authority. Prior to this position, he was the Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development of the ASEAN Development Bank in Manila, and previously he was Vice Minister of the Indonesia's Ministry of Transportation. Without further ado, I'd like to request His Excellency Bambang Susantono to give a keynote. Please, Pak.
Thank you, Ibu Fauziah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning and a very good day to all of you, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure to join these very important sessions and offer some thought on how we can promote sustainable investment and financing to infrastructure development. So let me set the stage by sharing an overview of the 5 megatrends that I believe are shaping or will shape the world we live in today and in the future. The first megatrend is the epidemics. We are now beginning an era of a post-pandemic recovery conditions that may last for the next 3 to 5 years. It will be varied between and within countries. And at this point, our understanding is still developing. Nowadays, when we develop an economic model, for example, we have to take into account epidemiological modeling variables. That's not happened before, or perhaps very rare that we do the health modeling together with economic modeling. So our operating environment will still be in recovery mode in the next 3 to 5 years. The second trend is climate change and also the environment. Climate change will remain a major issue and undoubtedly shape the way infrastructure will be developed in the future, both in mitigations and adaptation measures. Climate proofing, carbon pricing, and the NDC, National Determinant Contributions, are among the subjects which will affect our operating environment. We also need to tackle the impact of human activities on the environment, such as plastic waste, declining air and water quality, and others. So these issues dictate us to work more with nature in the future. The third and rather unfortunate trend is the widening inequality. COVID-19 has exposed gaps in our social protection system and highlighted social exclusion and gender inequality. A recent study, joint study by ADB, UNDP, and also UNESCAP shows that the pandemic has resulted in a global decline in human development for the first time in 30 years, and a rise in extreme poverty in Asia and the Pacific for the first time in 20 years. So there will be no economic recovery unless we take care also the equity dimensions. The fourth megatrend is digitalization. Technology will be the game changer. We can recall that before the pandemic, we already predicted that technology, including digital technology, would shape our new normal. The pandemic has accelerated the trend, especially in digitalizations, but we need to find new ways to close the digital divide. We should ensure that everyone, including marginalized and vulnerable groups, has access to digital economy. Failing to do so will lead to widening inequality and risk the creation of more poverty. And the last trend is urbanizations. By mid-21st century, more than half of all people will live in cities. In Asia alone, around 120,000 people every day migrate to cities. This will push the demand for infrastructure and its related aspect. And not only that, but we have also to think about urban and rural linkages and how we can address both issues in an integrated and systematic way. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, these megatrends that change our world have forced us to adapt and thus highlighting the importance of sustainable infrastructure. By definition, sustainable infrastructure includes either built or natural systems that provide a range of services in a manner that ensures economic, financial, social, environmental, and institutional sustainability. These systems range from strategic planning all the way to decommissioning and repurposing. They can include energy, water, transportation, communications, flood protection, and other valuable resources necessary for a society and its economy to function. So how can we deliver sustainable infrastructure? We all know that there is no single universal approach to building sustainable infrastructure. Thankfully, there are numerous instruments that can be applied in different situations to assist in the planning, financing, constructing, and running of infrastructure more sustainably. I am certain that the speakers in the next panel discussion can share about the instruments that are available at their disposal. However, the general rule is that the integrations of sustainability into infrastructure should start at the earliest or furthest upstream possible. Policymakers, in consultation with other stakeholders, can come up with legislative, regulatory, and institutional environment that facilitate better integration of sustainability further downstream in the life cycle. Let me take Indonesia's new capital, Nusantara, as an example, where we, the Capital City Authority, apply the upstream approach for sustainability. At the outset, we want the city to have three features: a forest city, a spawn city, and a smart city. As a forest city, Nusantara will be dominated by forest area, which functions as ecosystem services that let the residents live alongside with nature. Being a spawn city, we want Nusantara to increase water absorption capacity, which not only will reduce the risk of flooding, but also to enhance the supply of high-quality fresh water. Lastly, as a smart city, Nusantara will integrate technologies that will accelerate the productivity and life quality of the residents. These are the three features that will guide the city development down the line, and will let the city to be more resilient to withstand all the future problems and also challenges. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let us now shift gear to the next part of the discussions, how to finance this effort. Building sustainable infrastructure will certainly demand large investments that are often beyond the means of the public sector alone. Promisingly, private financing focusing on sustainability, such as green finance, has grown rapidly in the last decade. Such financing helps develop resilience against shocks and reduce sustainability risk, and thus meet the interests of different stakeholders. Green finance also fosters positive recognitions among investors that broadening the financing base. Such shift in investor preference coined a relatively new term, the sustainable financing, which generally refers to the process of taking environmental, social, and governance, or we know it as ESG, into consideration when making investment decisions in the financial sector. This process then leads to increased longer-term investment into sustainable economic activities and projects. So despite the huge potential, the market for sustainable financing remains at an early stage of development. Thus, the key to nurturing sustainable financing is having an engaged and public policy and stakeholders' participations. The governments, for example, can use a range of policy options to introduce also some measures that include, for example, to enforce common standard of information disclosure and impact measurements with considerations of the ESG. Some other options include encouraging sound financial market infrastructure and a viable market ecosystem. Let me take again Nusantara as an example. We are currently preparing regulations to attract investment that consider ESG aspect. Our funding scheme is also designed to be more appealing to international grants and development financing for green cities, as well as creative financing that includes blended finance and also carbon trading. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, beyond financing, there is a lesson learned come from the two greatest challenges that our generation is facing today, the climate change and also the COVID-19 pandemic. From the crisis, we learned the imperative to move forward by building our infrastructure better, differently, and together. As we have some colleagues from the energy sector here, let me take energy as an example. In the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were abruptly forced to pause our economies. The decisions has resulted in some temporary reductions in air pollution and also emissions. Cities had blue skies, rivers and streams were clear, and nature was back to its pristine condition. This reminds us not only that we must, but we can make fundamental changes for sustainability. To avoid us going back to business as usual, we will need to build better. This will require making the way we use the energy smarter to ensure energy efficiencies, such as by introducing smart energy power supply, centralized energy monitoring system, and smart meter based on the Internet of Things. There is also the need to build differently the infrastructure required to overcome the future climate and health challenges. For instance, climate change will dictate the growing number of renewable energy and phasing out of coal and fossil fuel. The smart mini-grid system will become more and more economical and practical to manage. It is also for this reason that in the new capital Nusantara, we envision that renewable energy will fulfill 100% of the city's energy needs by 2045. And then we will need to build back together our global actions to tackle COVID-19, whether it be financial assistance or vaccine supplies, are just another piece of evidence that partnership increases resilience. We are really strongest when we work together. To succeed, each of us will have a role to play as government, business, investors, civil society, associations, development institutions, and of course, individuals. The fact that we have dedicated our time and commitment to come together at this T20 summit as a reminder to ourselves that there is no success without joining forces. Thus, partnership helps find new ways to take on long-standing challenges in unprecedented times. It can help inspire and also lay the groundwork for new approaches to development. This will be essential if we are to bounce forward and not to bounce back by building better, differently and together toward achieving sustainable infrastructure. So I look forward to hearing from our panel on how best we can do this. I hope our discussion today will give the stage for valuable lessons and exchanges that continue beyond this summit. Thank you, terima kasih, and have a fruitful discussion. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, for a new, I think, enrichment and straightforward also remind us of the new challenges that we have, the complex conditions that we have now with 5 megatrends that Pak Bambang mentions, and also the new paradigm to have development principles on the better, differently, and together, Pak. Ya. Okay, I would like to request our panelists to join me on the stage, Ibu Sinthya Roesly, Pak Stefanus Ade, and also Nicolas. Nicolas is not here yet. Yeah, perhaps, yeah, he's in the next room. Okay, would you like to join me on the stage? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pak. Nicolas. Okay, we have a very prominent speakers here. I would like to introduce briefly. First is Bapak Stefanus Ade Hadiwidjaja, Chief Investment Officer at Indonesia Investment Authority. Previously, he was in the private sectors, as Managing Director of Creators and other positions in the private entities. Nicolas, welcome. And next to me is Ibu Sinthya Roesly, Director of the Finance and Risk Management of PT PLN. Previously, Ibu Sinthya was President Director of Indonesia Infrastructure Guarantee Fund, or PT PII. I learned a lot from her. From the very beginning, I learned about infrastructure development. Thank you, Ibu. And next, Mr. Nicolas Buchoud, the President of the Grand Paris Alliance for Metropolitan Development and co-owner of Renaissance Urbain. We will start with opening statement from each panelist. It's 5 minutes for each panelist. I would like to begin from Bapak Stefanus. Perhaps Pak Stefanus can enlighten us on the B20's proposal on the infrastructure finance to the G20 leaders. Please, the time is yours, Pak.
Sure. Thank you, Ibu. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me start with the opening statement about the importance of infrastructure as part of the this whole B20 finance and infrastructure chair. We all know that infrastructure is really a fundamental driver of a strong and sustainable growth of any economy. Right? And as you can see, some of the biggest countries in the world, they managed to push a growth for such a long period through the development of the infrastructure. And even then, globally, we know that there's a massive gap in the infrastructure financing. Right? I mean, there are many different studies, but some studies suggest that the gap can be as big as 10 trillion US dollars in the next 10 years or so. So it's a very big gap, or even more. And that's probably only the data for some of the developed countries, not to mention about the emerging markets that might require even more investment in infrastructure. With that in mind, we know all these G20 countries, we need to collaborate and to ensure that we can play an important role to making sure that the development of infrastructure and the financing behind it can be sustainable. So we have laid out 4 recommendations within the chair on how we want to recommend to the G20 leaders. First is about the improving the accessibility of what we call an affordable financing for infrastructure. Because the background is clear, we have a big gap on that. Two is about how we accelerate the development of just transition towards the net zero economy. Third is about also how we accelerate the development of the digital infrastructure, which is currently is an equally important infrastructure to the physical infrastructure itself. And lastly, we have to also help recommend the improvement in the regulatory framework in the financial services globally to make sure that this different structure of financing, innovation in this kind of financing for the infrastructure is acceptable. So that's a quick summary of what we will recommend to the G20 leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak Stefanus. We will get back again on your to you, about the you mentioned about the B20 proposals. But I'd like to ask Ibu Sinthya, would you provide us your thoughts on Indonesian financing schemes for sustainable infrastructure and also including energy transition? Please, Ibu.
Thank you, Bu Fauziah. Very good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very honored to be here amongst everyone. Thanks again for inviting for this very good opportunity. I think talking about the theme that we have today, sustainable investment and financing as a new approach for infrastructure development. And from Pak Bambang speech this morning, we have also reminded on the approach on how to look on the infrastructure development from various perspectives. And I think we have also, everyone here in the room have already been aware on several aspects on talking about the infrastructure investment. One is really, I think the old idea that we have is really PPP, right? People, profit, and planet. And then it now transfer into not new, but the I think recent terms that we have now, ESG, before it's MDGs, SDG, and ESG, and how we put all of this PPP and ESG into the context of infrastructure financing. So I think for Indonesia, as I think also from most of the countries, now this issue on the energy transitions is one of the key topics that need to be solved by everyone in the global platform as well as regional platform and Indonesia platform. I may also share some thought on this because currently Indonesia under the G20 presidency is currently in the process of developing a framework and showing how to do it and what to expect from the global market, from the investors, lenders, and some of the multilateral institutions, as well as the philanthropies, and how to support an infrastructure project which is sustained, which is also, ensuring that everyone is going from the brown energy to the green energy. So the energy transition is really something that we are working at this moment, and this is really a challenge. I think we can discuss later on what are the challenges. Most of the challenges are. One is really the understanding on, how do we go from the brown energy to the green energy. So there is a terms of energy transitions that everyone needs to understand on how they should get involved into this energy transition platform. We've met with many investors and lenders, and they have concerns on, because everyone now is having a net zero carbon roadmap. And no one would dare to get absorbing the brown energy, say coal power plant, into their balance sheet, and then how they would dispose this from their balance sheet from time to time. So there is a challenge on how the mechanism of the energy transition. I think this is really a challenge for everyone. And second is really on the underlying itself, like PLN, for example. Indonesia has more than 60% of the coal power plants, so the energy production is sourced from coal. And we need to do the energy transitions. So the underlying of the power plants for the early retirements or conversions between from the coal-fired power plants into the renewable energy is really a challenge. And so we have our also responsibility in preparing the project, preparing the brown project into the green project to be able to be absorbed by the market. So those are, that's a second aspect. So one is really the understanding of the market and the platform from the investors and the financiers, and the underlying itself, like PLN, the utilities like us. And the third is really on the government side. So on the policy and regulatory framework that needs to support the transition. This is also interesting. Indonesia currently has set up what we call it a country platform for the energy transition. And this is also a challenge because we need to really have the same understanding on how we do it and how can the impact of the energy transition be absorbed by the government from the fiscal budget. So I think this is just to show that when we talk about the sustainable investment and financing, so we need to look into the broader picture of the platform first before we talk about, of course, the underlying of the project needs to look into the, environmental and social and governance feasibility perspective. So that's really a must-have aspect. So that's basically not an issue. Everyone needs to understand that every project, the underlying project needs to ensure that the investment has to be based on the ESG, feasible. But most important is really on how to do it and how to go, move from the brown energy to the energy, to the green energy. So I think that's really the challenge, and probably I think Nicolas can also explain on how the T20 works can also have some color on this and some policy recommendations. Thank you, Bu.
Thank you, Bu Sinthya. Interesting views that you remind us about not only the principles but also how to do it. Especially from the private sector's views on the balance sheets changing to shift from the brown to green. We will get back on that again later, Bu Sinthya. Thank you. Now, Mr. Nicolas. Could you enlighten us about the global investment platform for urban development projects?
Thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure to be in this session today. It's not the conclusion, but it's already an achievement of the work that was conducted in our task force and led by Professor Danang Parikesit. Just before I will answer your question and also the remark from Ibu Sinthya, but just one quick remark in the beginning. How can think tank, right, working in the world of concepts and ideas and policy notes, sometimes in rooms like this, have any impact on real scale infrastructure investments, right? Because if you are building an MRT or a power station or a power line, or you are thinking about renewables, etc., you don't really need think tanks, right? You need money, you need investors, you need operators, maintenance. It was mentioned last year in the G20, recognized the value of maintenance. So, but the real question that is constantly addressed to, I would say, us is how can think tank have any leverage on concrete, go outside, right? Outside here in Bali or in Jakarta or wherever, and you will see constantly how can we have an impact, right? Because where are the decisions made and how to leverage investments. So here, for instance, our organization, which we created 11 years ago in Paris, the rationale was very, very simple in the beginning. Decision was made at state level in France to have a major investment in the Paris region, like Greater Jakarta, right? About 40 billion euros invested in one single double loop transportation project. Then I thought, I was not the only one, but if there is a decision to allocate such an important amount of investment. And for a country like France, it's not Paris, it's not the region of Paris, it is the country, right, which is established a public company, and all the investment, they are backed by the French sovereign debt. So it's in Paris, but it's a project at the country level. And part of the funding comes from the EU, right? This gives you immediately what we are talking about in terms of scale, and private money, of course, comes in the equation, but cannot be the core, right? So we thought, if there is a decision already made and all the political process done from the President of the Republic, who usually should not decide about infrastructure investments here or there, right? But because it's capital city, what about all the socio-economic spillover effects, right? And you expand the understanding from just the infrastructure investments to all the spillover effects, then you see that rarely there is any significant structured place to think about what will be the outputs in terms of well-being, the outputs of, in terms of convergence with housing, with health, and with a number of other factors. Furthermore, what about the impacts, for example, on poverty? What about the impacts about the organization of a whole metropolitan space that occupies a significant portion of the country, and that in terms of investments is over a third of the total of foreign direct investment country, etc. And here comes think tanks in the equation, because you need those places where you direct and redirect the arguments, the issues about finance, the issues about operations, etc. This is the exact reason why it is the right place to launch an initiative such as this global investment platform or global urban investment platform for sustainable infrastructure. This idea has been floating around. The context of the, for instance, the infrastructure task force of the T20, which I have been co-chairing now for 4 years. And somehow, because the way the T20 was structured this year, we have the co-chairs, but we have also thematic coordinators, and there is a very strong domestic agenda, right? So we are constantly like moving different parameters, interconnecting them together, and you are a good example, right, of this. This is the right place and the right moment. I would just like, if you give me 1 minute, to highlight another element. My humble experience is that the T20 cannot function in isolation. Right? A lot of good people have great ideas, especially about infrastructure and sustainable and innovation and smart and whatever you want, digital transformations, outside of the T20 arena, in companies, in advisory companies, consultancies, etc. Here, it's a bit different because we are a space of a relative neutrality, right? What we are competing for, what we want to achieve, what we work for in a voluntary manner, is because we believe there is something for somehow the greater good of the general interest, we can foster new ideas. But when I say the T20 cannot work in isolation, is that significant progress, really leapfrog, was made, especially after last year. There was a joint converging approach between T20, B20, and another D, we can cover all the letters of the alphabet, D20, long-term investment club. It's not really incorporated as an engagement group like ours, but it's the sovereign investment funds. And there was a joint statement. In its joint statement about sustainable infrastructure finance was really driven by the outlook and the research of the T20, but also by the business perspectives, right? Hands-on, and by also the funding from long-term investment institutions. This year it was continued, right? So the second year, and we start having some more concrete outputs. And I see, this will be my last word at this moment of our conversation, the emergence of this proposal, let's push for a global sustainable infrastructure investment at G20 level as a direct outcome of the evolution, the maturation of the process in the T20, and these joining forces with B20 and D20. I'm mentioning this because after this G20 summit is over, the work will start, right? Between now and the G20 summit, between now and the Indian G20. And here also the value of having think tanks and research organizations around the table to ensure some levels of continuity. So I've been too long, sorry, but I'm sure we will get back to those elements in a minute. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Nicolas. Before I start with the other questions, I would like to give an opportunity for Pak Ade and Ibu Sinthya to comment if you have short comment on the Nicolas propositions on the T20 rules, yeah, to impact on this real world.
I think I couldn't agree more. So it's already covered by Nicolas perfectly. That we need to come every idea from different streams into one recommendations for the G20, right? To have probably a global platform in executing and ensuring that the sustainable infrastructure development are there, and everyone understand on how to navigate around that. Currently, I think we have all these ideas from the business, from the think tank, from development and some other streams, but I think we really need to have one concrete platform globally, if not regionally or even nationally, on how to execute things so that everyone understand the language and everyone understand what are available from various level of institution, from the government, from the public sectors, from the utilities, from the companies, from the private sectors, from the lenders, financiers, investors, so everyone understand. So what is available in this platform so that people know how to do it. I think that's probably the pressure that we need to push now, right? So let's have a concrete global platform and how to push that. So for example, in our, I think in the communique we also mentioned that even the ESG, scoring, we don't have that. We have Sustainalytics, we have a Moody's, we have Fitch, etc. But no one, have the same understanding and same taxonomy of the risk or the definition of the ESG and how to measure that. So that when you finance or you come into a project in Indonesia or probably in the Europe or in Africa, you understand that the level of ESG score for that particular project is at that level, so that you can measure the risk and you can know how much the premium that you need to expect from any particular project. So I think what we need now is really a concrete platform. Then we expect that the G20 can have that. Yeah, probably, or at least some action points or action trackers that everyone understand on how to push that towards a concrete platform. Thank you.
Bu Sinthya, you mentioned previously that Indonesia is developing a platform of it.
Yeah. I think on the energy transition mechanism, recently Indonesia has what we call it country platform, and the Ministry of Finance has already assigned one of the special mission vehicles, the PT SMI, as the country platform manager. So basically, the idea is you have a various source of financing, blended finance, multilateral, lenders, commercials, and etc. And then there is a stream of two projects basically. One is really early retirements. The purpose is for early retirements for the energy transition. And the second is the renewable energy, new renewable energy development. And this country platform manager would look into how to structure the project that can be acceptable by the market, whether it's for equity or for debt financing, or whether they need to get the guarantee from IGF or from the government or some other de-risking instruments to ensure that this energy transition mechanism is workable. So, I think ADB is also helping the government in developing this platform, but it still needs to be tested because it's just 1 month, 1-2 months ago being developed, and currently we are working on it. So that's probably can be a showcase, right? It's challenging. It's frankly, it's very, very challenging because we really need to ensure that everyone in the stakeholders, the ecosystem understands what the language of this energy transition. So that's why I think from the global perspective, it's a global infrastructure platform that we need to set up. And then we have this country platform. So at least for the G20, we hope that Indonesia can kickstart and start to have a sense of how we should push this forward. So I think that's probably from the Indonesian government perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. Interesting. Pak Ade, Pak Stefanus, sorry.
I think thank you, Bu Sinthya, thank you, Nicolas. I think all very good points. And just to continue from the point about Nicolas, which I totally agree that the most important now is how to move from the thinking into the execution to the impact, right? And then Bu Sinthya rightly so that the government effort has been in many ways to make sure this all happen, right? Because it's a collaboration of the government, the investor, as well as the operators. And from us, INA, Indonesia Investment Authority, we are from the perspective, we are coming from the perspective of the investor, right? So our role in here is sort of to be the bridge between a different kind of investor, as what Bu Sinthya mentioned, the equity investor, the debt financing, the MDB, to make sure all this initiative can happen. I mean, obviously the most immediate one is the ETM initiative that we are currently working on a couple of projects. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Nicolas.
Yes, maybe if you allow me two more remarks. The first one, the interest of continuity, which is allowed by the fact that despite there are different G20 cycles, right? The T20 is also ensuring some continuity, especially through the infrastructure task force. We do not have to reinvent the wheel every year. What is an infrastructure, what is sustainable, what is green, smart, etc. And for instance, this year, we organized two big seminars with the Ministry of Finance about the topic sustainable infrastructure, sustainable investments, always in convergence, T20, B20, D20, right? One in the winter, in February, the other one in May. And a lot of arguments were in fact convened, not necessarily by the T20 itself, but by people who were around the table for the meeting of the finance track, which took place in Bali in mid-July, especially through members of the G20. So here you can see the arguments, right? They are being spread out all over the place. That's the first point. The second point is again about how to continue, how to move on, right? When you have such a brilliant idea, right? Oh, a global platform, a G20, that's fantastic, everyone applauds, and then right? There are already platforms, there are already financial mechanisms by the dozens. Let me give you a very short illustration of what it can lead to when we combine the different elements, that is the thinking, the G20 context, and then other aspects and dimensions, for example, linked with energy or waste. Governor of Jakarta visited Paris a few weeks ago, right, in springtime. And then initially we thought, let's discuss about MRT, right, Jakarta and this Paris project. And then quickly the conversation expanded. Let's discuss about MRT, about energy, about waste, about water, and about the major utilities. So it is not the high-flying concepts, but it's really billions, right? And it is serving the people and transforming the landscapes. And when there was the Jakarta, the Urban 20 Mayor's Summit last week in Jakarta, and also the Jakarta Investment Forum, then we signed 2 cooperation agreements with the major public authorities in the Greater Paris areas, one about waste and one about water. We will see, but the common ground of that is let's team up between Jakarta and Paris, in that case, right? Or in the Jakarta as a place and Paris as a place, also to push, to review the SDGs, right? There is an SDG about cities and communities, SDG 11. It has some good things, but many flaws. It was designed in the past, it was designed before the current crisis, it was designed before the pandemic, and it is not very helpful when it comes to how do we direct investments, right? It's just a few principles. So this, you can see these things swirling from the T20 to other groups, to investments, to cities as spaces for investments, but also to these cycles of negotiation about climate and so on. And the last point is why it is important to do this now in the context of the G20 Indonesia. So no one ignores that the overall geopolitical context is extremely complicated, right? But that doesn't mean we cannot move on a number of things. So after the G20 summit, before the G20 leaders summit, there will be other meetings. And in particular, in conjunction with the development of the country platform and the just energy transition mechanism, I would really recommend that, at least for the beginning, this idea of a G20 platform or investment platform for sustainable investment and infrastructure would be positioned as a booster or as a component of energy transition mechanisms. It cannot be limited to energy, but in the beginning this would help, because also these energy transition mechanisms and all the sustainable finance, you mentioned that goes with this, with the multilateral development banks and multilateral financial institutions, is also acknowledged in the context of the climate talks and climate negotiations. So I think, see, Professor Bambang, Danang and Susantono, in the next steps when there will be further meetings with the Ministry of Finance, especially of Indonesia, but also of India, right? This is exactly the simple roadmap that should be put on the table, because I understand also from our colleagues of the T20 India, G20 India, which are also next door, right? That there is a lot of interest for continuing this, for sustainable investments, but also for this urban dimension, which up until recently was really in the very deep periphery of the G20 galaxy, but now there is an understanding that we need to do something with that and leverage investments. So, and we together have part of the answer.
Thank you, Nicolas, and other panelists. You just reminded me that the infrastructure projects, not only big ones, not only mega projects, but also many of the cases is local projects, such as waste management, local transportations, water systems. So the implementations levels at the local governments, and it add to more complexities, yeah, because the platform perhaps more unstable by the central governments or by the global governance, but to make this the same understanding with the municipality governments is another challenge. Okay, from there I would like to move to the one of the social and government aspects of ESG. It's inclusivity in infrastructure provisions. So I'd like to pose the questions to the panelists. In your views and experience, yeah, what aspects of inclusivity is the most important and why? Perhaps I could start with Pak Stefanus.
Probably it's hard to say which one is the most important, but I'll give you example. Again, I will always bring our real experience in INA. One of the key things that we are working on is digital inclusion, right? And that's through one of our key pillars, out of the 4 key pillars, is digital, which include the digital infrastructure and obviously the digital commerce. Right? Obviously, people always knows about all the tech companies, the digital commerce, all the players, but sometimes people forget about what's the equally important, which is the digital infrastructure. So I think that's this is the, as I said in the beginning, it's an equally important infrastructure as the physical infrastructure. And when we talk about it, we did one investment in one of the largest telco towers, which is owned by Telkom, Mitratel. As we know, the penetration of the tower and BTS in Indonesia is among the lowest among, within the region, which is quite sad. So we want to play a role to make sure we have, the right accessibility of the information and the quality also. We're also thinking about helping pushing the development of a large-scale data center as well as the edge data centers within the cities, and also the fiberization of many of the key cities as well as mid-sized cities all over Indonesia. I think through this kind of investment, which again similar to what being shared by Ibu Sinthya, we require a collaboration of the local government, the investor, different kind of investor. We have the equity investor, the debt investor, the MDB to help make sure we can really develop this kind of infrastructure fast, high quality, and really targeted to the right segments. I think that's one thing that I want to share about the inclusion, which is the digital inclusion.
Yeah. So it's your role, to include the inclusion aspects as the objective of your investments.
Yeah,
yes.
Because for us, again, the two key mandates is basically it has to deliver the right commercial return because we are a commercial investor. But second, we also have the mandate to bring in capital to co-invest with us, long-term capital, not only short-term capital, in developing in this kind of projects, right? And eventually, if we can doing these two rights, we will help in pushing the economic and social development in Indonesia. So these are the three things that part of our objective, right? And we believe if we can, the economic development and social development is an automatic result of the right capital allocation. So our role in here is obviously we want to try to find the best project that deliver the right commercial return because we have to bring in global capital. But on the other hand, we also play a role in here to be the salesman, to help structure the project, to help explain about different kind of risk and return profile of different kind of projects, right? Because some of the global investors, they think, what is the risk of developing a really, let's say, large-scale 100 megawatt data center in Indonesia? But the challenges on implementing the fiberization in the cities in Indonesia. Is it easy to work with the local government? And also, for example, investing in toll road, right? We currently have a couple of projects in all the things that I mentioned. Our role in here is really to sit down together, try to make sure different kind of stakeholders can talk and negotiate together and make things happen. Probably Pak Danang Parikesit knows this very well in all of our projects, and thank you, Pak, to get all the input from Pak Danang also. So that's our role, to be the bridge, to make sure the project is feasible for different kind of investor, ranging from the debt to the equity investor. If we can do this right, the economic and social development will happen, including the inclusion goals of us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Pak Stefanus. Then I'd like to ask Ibu Sinthya your opinion about that.
I think for PLN as a power utility, the inclusivity is very, that's really the core of the core of the mandate. We have been working with the safeguard the environmental and social, and developing power infrastructure all over the country with 17,000 islands, 270 millions to be covered. We have 84 millions customers. So inclusivity, I think, quite broad in PLN practice. Starting from customers, we are incorporating digital, new PLN mobile, access to technology is now being open, and it increased the services to the customers. Disruptions, power disruptions will be addressed very, very quickly now. So I think services is increased by the inclusions of the digital technology. Within PLN itself, we also do a lot of digital initiatives in the transformations of internal PLN. And for the infrastructure development, of course, the environmental and social and the people-centric is really something, because infrastructure is really getting great impact to the society. And we are also providing grievance mechanism process, people, society, the ecosystem through our CSR and all these usual things in a good practice of the utility in the world. So I think that's probably the example of the power systems. There are still area for development, of course, because the challenge is keep continuing, the pollutions, the waste and etc. But we are trying to look into the overall comprehensive view in ensuring that the people and the planet is there, although we are serving them with electricity, but ensure that it is going to be sustainable environmentally and of course for people, and also that when you are sustained environmentally, then your financial sustainability is not that at stake. Yeah, Fauziah.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to add more link to Nicolas on the same question actually regarding Pak Bambang's mentions on the principle that the sustainability principle should be should start from the earliest stage of the sustainable investment. How do you see it?
Yes, I cannot disagree with that. In the joint statement of B20, T20 and D20 last year in Rome in September, the last paragraphs were about transportation infrastructure, and for the first time ever, and I was at last this is arriving, housing, right? And even urban regeneration. And this was not introduced by the think tanks, this was introduced in fact by the B20 and by major investors, because there is, at last it is coming, right? Real estate markets are completely integrated. Finance go here and there, etc. And then at the local level, in capital cities, but also in second, third tier cities, the situation is even worse. Mayors, local authorities, they are constantly complaining, oh, we have no control, and then the real estate developers, they can do whatever they want, and there is a lack of affordable housing, and so on. You go to Paris, you go to many places in the US or wherever, you will find in different gradients kind of the same issues. But the issue of how to regulate or address the questions of managing those real estate markets for affordability and sustainable development, etc., was never addressed at G20 level, for example, or at a real macroeconomic level. Right? The UN, they have a special envoy for housing, but she's advocating for slum upgrading and super grassroots levels, but not addressing the core of the functioning of the real estate markets. Last week, the mayor of Rotterdam, right? It's a small anecdote. I know it is recorded, but it's among us. A small anecdote, and people are watching online. Small anecdote. There was the mayor of Rotterdam, the governor of Jakarta, and the representative of the World Bank on the same stage. The representative of the World Bank made a presentation like he would have done 10 years ago, right? We need more private capital, there are not enough resources, blah, 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 etc. And both mayors were looking at him, what are you saying? Right? We need engagement, we need regulation, and we need more control. It doesn't mean like super controlled markets, but we need to be able to have level of control on markets. And that goes through the G20 sustainable finance initiatives and other initiatives that then can be, I would say, transformed into regional guidelines, such as when we have the EU or some aspects of the ASEAN Comprehensive Framework, or at national or at regional level, right? Then you can go to inclusiveness. But otherwise, if it's just about repeating endlessly, there are some small pocket projects, let's scale them up, and let's find some capital. We can see that this was on the table for the last decade, and it has worked. But on the other hand, the magnitude of challenges about inclusions, for in socio-economic inclusion, and addressing the questions of transformations of labor markets and providing not just decent but interesting jobs for the youth, etc., were not addressed. Right? So there is a quantitative here issue which is extremely important not to forget about.
Okay, thank you. again, on the challenges to implement green finance, yeah, due to the high upfront investment costs, from several discussions in our task force 8, yeah, there are two proposed interventions, yeah, that can be pursued by the G20. One is the fiscal policy as enabler to facilitate green finance, and second on the progressive introduction of digital innovations and robotic technology to lower capital expenditure and also operational expenditure. So what do you think about that? I start with Nicolas. Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes you have also to consider how the situation is, right? So for instance, in Europe, in this moment, this is still very much accurate, right? But the daily issues is how do we secure gas, fuel, and other energies. So while the no countries, especially at the EU level, wants to withdraw from any kind of commitments, because we are supposed to be the world leaders in that. On the other hand, we can see because of the war in Ukraine and the drought in this summer, for instance, the Rhine River, right, going to Rotterdam, was so low that some shipping of fuel and other products could not be done by boat. They has to be done by trucks. Imagine the number of trucks to replace the number of boats. So in this moment, we are in a bit of a under pressure situation where the ESG and so on and so on and so on. But if you go to Germany, if you go to France, see, all governments say, yeah, let's put the pause button on this moment and let's make sure we can heat our buildings in this winter, right? And we are not used, how is it possible, right? We are not used to deal with such emergency situations in this moment, and that's very complicated. However, we can see traveling a few thousand kilometers, the situation is not exactly the same here in Southeast Asia or in Indonesia, although there are a number of interconnections. One impact being that at G20 level, the governance is very complicated. And my answer to your precise questions would be in this moment here there is I feel there is an energy and the capacities and also a will, and because Indonesia is chairing the G20 and is also preparing to chair the ASEAN next year, such issues which you are mentioning, where expertise in all over the place, still can be maybe pushed further, right? With experience and with drawing the lessons from the pandemic, especially here, about all the impacts, positive impacts it has had on statistical records and ways to provide welfare down to community level, whereas beforehand it was more the bureaucracy, a little bit blind, distributing some subsidies, etc. And the last element in that context I wanted to share with you, yesterday here we launched together with our colleagues from India, from Professor Bambang was also here, and South Africa and Brazil, a G20 research forum, right? And the main questions was development. We need to reconsider or repurpose or rethink development policies according to investments, according to macroeconomic policies, according to green, according to to sustainable finance and sustainability. And probably there can be some joint project, especially in the fields which you described, that could be carried out also through the G20 India in conjunction with what happens here in terms of investments. And I'm returning to our platform. This is also something that could prevail in the context of Indonesia, India, Brazil, probably South Africa, bound to be chairing the G20 in the next years, all major economies, all facing also a number of challenges, but all also non-belonging to the OECD, right? Hence, the opportunity, the need, and the challenge to foster new policy frameworks that would not be the exact same ones that exist in the West or in the global North, and that sometimes is difficult to accommodate in the so-called global South, but those parameters are changing.
Thank you, Nicolas. Excellent. Now I would like to ask opinion from Pak Stefanus.
Just a minor point to add to that. Your question about will the application of digital help in lowering the capex and opex of the infrastructure development and make it more efficiency? The answer is absolutely. Right. I'll give another example that, for example, in airport also. This area is one of the key part of the development of infrastructure in Indonesia, where INE has been actively involved in, not only finding the capital, but what we like to say is to find the smart capital. So to help improve the quality of the infrastructure, the port, the airport, the cargo, for example. Just one interesting point. Even during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, we know all the airport business actually slowed down significantly, but not the air cargo. So that's showing that there's a major needs to make sure when the market or the economy recovers, we have the right infrastructure to make sure all these key infrastructure can operate very well. And the use of digital in this, at least in these three kind of infrastructure is absolutely required, right? Just think about cargo. If we compare the cargo that we have in some of the emerging market compared to the cargo, let's say in Hong Kong terminal, Hong Kong airport, it's quite a big difference. How efficient, how fast they in managing all the movement of the products, and it's all about the technology, right? I mean, we always like to see the youth in YouTube, how Amazon used the robot on managing all the warehouse, the cargo and everything. It can apply in many different forms in this kind of infrastructure, right? I visited one of the largest port in Dubai last time, which is managed by Dubai Port World. I can see how the use of technology really improve the performance, the speed, the quality, and the accuracy of these movements of goods, right? And the same thing with airport, right? Many things that we can improve to make sure, the operational excellence within, the movement of the passengers as well as the ground handling can be better by the using of the technology. So, yes, in short, is absolutely required, and it will help a lot. Thank you.
Ibu Sinthya, please.
I think along with the recommendations from the T20 on the fiscal, particularly on the fiscal incentive or probably financial barrier that can be supported by any government, this is really, a real case situations. Like, for example, Indonesia, when we are doing the energy transitions for, the net zero carbon, then of course, there is a certain cost to that, right? Like, for example, in Indonesian case, we have this 62% of coal power plants. Then if we want to push that CO2 emission down, then there has to be a certain initiative, for example, an early retirement of the coal power plant. So there is a cost to the retirement. Who's gonna bear the cost? One is government, and second probably can be passed through to the customers with the increase of the tariff. So the government, I think from the fiscal perspective, from the budget, it needs to be allocated to a certain extent that this can be triggered in order to ensure more sustainable energy sectors. So I think that's currently we are in discussion with the Ministry of Finance, and I think the gesture is there. So the government are, probably concept-wise, they understand and they are willing to do it. Subject to the, how much is the number for that. So before we are getting into new infrastructure, renewable energy development, there is also a certain discussions on that, on the fiscal incentive, tax incentive, on the technology adoption, etc., etc. for the import duty of the components, which is mostly imported. So that's a different area. But for the energy transitions, early retirement of the power plants, it needs a certain cost. Whether we are accelerated the depreciation, shortening up the tenor of the power plant. So there's a cost of that because there's a value to the asset. Or spinning off the asset like IPP or even PLN power plants. Somebody needs to absorb that, by accelerating the tenor of the power plant, for example. So I think we are talking with INA already because there is a certain exercise now we are doing, and INA on the equity side getting into a PPA, replacing a certain shareholders, but shortening up the PPA tenor. That meaning that there is a certain CO2 reduction, carbon avoidance that can be, absorbed from and can be resulted from the certain deals. So I think this is something that probably the government also, from fiscal perspective, can see that to ensure that investors probably also, as a kickstart, they have an interest and there is incentive for them, and also to ensure that the market is going to be enabled so that everyone understand. Currently, I think this is quite challenging. I've spoken. We've done our NDR to the Korea, Japan, and Singapore last month, and the challenge is there that because no one would, because everyone is having their net zero carbon roadmap, so everyone needs to reduce their carbon emission with their assets, investment in their countries on other countries. And also the regulators, like for example for the project developers, investors, they are also, the investors also, they are also being scrutinized by the implementation of the carbon zero roadmap. So there is something that the challenge for them, how can we get into a situation where this energy transitions can be done with without any support from the fiscal, So there is probably also a common understanding, not only from the government, from the fiscal perspective, but also from the regulator perspective. Because like lenders, the bank, financial industry, they are bound to. There is also a certain regulatory framework for them to do a certain sustainable financing. And they are also being forbidden to get into any project that is coal or related or brown related project. So there has to be a certain transition period that can be also arranged in a way that everyone is, whether it's lenders, banks, or investors, are comfortable that they are getting into certain assets, putting their money there, get the profits, but it's not considered as they are against the expectations from the regulators or anyone from the government. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Sinthya. It's for the examples, and real examples currently. And Nicolas, you would like to say something?
Yes. In parallel, so we were talking about the energy transition mechanism, right? And in the G7 space this year, Germany has launched the proposal of a climate club. In the beginning, nobody exactly knew what is this climate club. Then Indonesia, along with India and South Africa, were invited to join discussions with the G7 leaders in June about this climate club. The idea is I'm not promoting it specifically, but it's an interesting idea because it's about it's not a closed club, but it is about joining forces, especially aligning different scales, public, private, the different angles that Ibu Sinthya just perfectly recaptures, and try to find ways and countries which are ready to move on, right? And serve also as benchmark for the others. And in the context of the T7, there is a small group of think tanks, but which is very much connected to the T20. We introduced the idea of an infrastructure club to make sure that we would connect to these debates in case the climate clubs moves on, but also to use the best arguments from all over and see how coalitions can be formed and how new models can be forged out of new approaches to ESG, new approaches to net zero trajectories, but also having development and inclusion at the core of the system, which means also finding the ways, and I'm closing the loop with what I was saying in the very beginning, with the so-called urban issues in the local level, not considering that it's just a level of implementation, but that very strong lessons and strong inputs need to be heard from that level. So I will stop here, and apologies because I need to rush to another session. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, because we have arrived in the we have only 10 minutes spare here. I'd like to ask the closing statement from each panelist. Nicolas, you have already mentioned yours. Also, thank you again, Nicolas. Please have applause for Nicolas. Thank you. So I'd like to ask Pak Stefanus to give his closing statement, 1 minute, and then Ibu Sinthya.
I think just short one. Basically, the conclusion of our discussion is basically just it needs a collaboration of all parties, from the operator like PLN, from us as the investor, the multilateral development banks also playing a very important role in concession capital, and obviously the government. So I think we in INA, we try to be the bridge among the investor, but that itself is not enough. It has to be the collaboration of the whole parties to make this happen. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Pak Stefanus. Ibu Sinthya.
I think I would like to say that this is a very interesting time. It's very golden moments for everyone, that under the current global dynamics, geopolitics here and there, as well as the needs to push down the CO2 reductions to ensure that the climate change is not something that is going to put people, behind. So, for everyone to do their part in ensuring, in accordance with their role, in ensuring that whatever the things that we are having now, we need to really work together in addressing the issues. From PLN perspective, we are now also balancing those various conflicting aspects in terms of environmental, in terms of social, in terms of sustainability, in terms of affordability, and of course we need to really work closely with the government on ensuring that the fiscal support is reasonable enough, is accountable enough for ensuring this future sustainability for the country. I think that's from our side. Thank you.
Super, Bu. So we need to turn these pressure moments into the opportunity, Bu. Yeah. So, okay. Thank you very much. I have in the agenda I have a moderator's closing, but I think there are a lot of points that we have already absorbed. Yeah, and I don't need to really summarize it, but I'd like to put just a few points that we need more active think tank groups to get involved, yeah, in with the other key stakeholders, yeah, and the platforms are crucial. I took it from the Ibu Sinthya, Pak Stefanus. Yeah, the platforms are crucial and should be developed together so all stakeholders have the same language and understanding. And we need coherent platforms across national, regional, and global. and the use of technology for the benefits of more efficient and sustainable infrastructure. Next, we also need to work together to the next presidency of the G20, including the T20 India next year, and Brazil and South Africa. I would like to give a big applause to our panelists. Thank you very much for giving your time and very insightful discussions. I learned a lot, and I think we are very happy to have you here. Yeah, I'd like to give time to Professor Danang Parikesit to give closing remarks, and we can go back to, but don't go. Oh, so perhaps we could give the token of appreciation first, Pak. Yeah, please stay here. The organizers, ini dulu Pak.
Iya. Udah tenang kalau ada Mada.
Sorry.
Very good.
Thank you very much. From Pak Profesor Danang to Ibu Sinthya, thank you very much. Yeah, and then of course Professor Dr. Bambang Susantono to come to on the stage. Yeah. Okay, yeah, Pak Stefanus, thank you very much. And to our keynote speech, His Excellency Bambang Susantono. Thank you very much, Pak, for coming here. Yeah. Thank you again, all the panelists. Pak, thank you, Pak. Yeah. Thank you, Pak. Thank you, Ibu.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, and also friendly monkeys of this hotel. So not too friendly according to Pak Bambang. So I think we must have a interesting experience with the monkeys of Hilton Hotel. So once again, thanks for coming to this session. It's been very enjoyable and enlightening session for us, starting from the remarks from Pak Bambang and the keynote from Pak Bambang, talking about the mega trends and the challenges ahead to be faced by the G20 leaders, as well as the for himself as a chairman of the Indonesian new capital city Nusantara. Let me iterate on behalf of Task Force 8 our thanks and appreciations to everyone. And I would like to express to all delegates my sincere thanks for the attendance and active participations. On Sunday, Jeffrey Sachs, the fellow advisor of the 20, similar with Pak Bambang, explained two major challenges for us faced by both T20 as a group as well as G20. First is on the finance and second on the technology. And again, today I learned very interesting situation faced by the West, which is actually our daily challenge every day. So the survivability is actually in our daily challenge. Nicolas mentioned about the access to gas, electricity, food. It seems to, although people in the West seems to be panicking, whereas for us in the global South is our daily challenge. what we see as a challenge today for the digital technology, robotic technology seems to be their daily experience already. So I think we are facing a very interesting challenge as a group within the G20 as well as the T20. On Monday, yesterday, all the speakers are talking about the situation today that we are more divided than before because of these geopolitical conflicts in Europe and elsewhere. And there's needs to revive the spirit of collaborations, of cooperations. And I think this is becoming a very important message to us when we are talking about the platform for investments. Already Pak Bambang challenged me, is it going to work? This proposal for global investment platform, will it be applicable to different countries in the world? Is there already platforms for investments elsewhere that we can learn from? And he gave me a lesson of 3 Ds. First D is deploy, to deploy the ideas. And second, to demonstrate. And third is to disseminate. To deploy and disseminate, probably we can imagine it easily. But on the second D, demonstrate, there is a demon inside that. So at the demonstrate, there has a demon inside it. So it's going to be very difficult, very tough things to do. And once we are able to show that this is this demonstration could actually work, then we probably can start thinking about dissemination. So second D is, I think, is one of the important challenge for us within Task Force 8 to market this idea and to give an examples on the implementation of this global investment platforms. The keywords of within Task Force 8 is also de-risking projects when it comes to projects. And it's why the ideas of the blended finance, as mentioned by Pak Bambang, is very critical. But we need an examples again. Indonesian government has started to have a product of SDG Indonesia 1, thanks to MOF and SMI and IIGF, to push for an examples. Can we use that examples and can we replicate that examples? Again, demon is there. The detail that we need to work out on that is very important to showcase the examples. So again, in the last message I learned from Ibu Sinthya is the word transition. So once we move from these current situations to the better situations, I think the transitions need to be taken care of very seriously. Who will be able to take the risk of transitions? When we talk about if transitions is going to be absorbed domestically by national government, by existing fiscal capacity, I think there is a big doubt that it will succeed on its own. So I think going back to international collaboration, international cooperation is, I think, is going to be the major challenge ahead. So I will close my my remarks by once again thanks for those who are helping the process of T20, especially on the Task Force 8. I would probably thanks especially to Bambang Susantono for his presence during his busy time. And panelists, Pak Stefanus, Ibu Sinthya, of course, has been very supportive to us since the beginning of this task force. Pak Nicolas is also our bridge to T7 and G7. My appreciations to Ibu Fauziah is not only the moderator, excellent moderator for today, but also a bridge to our knowledge partners, ERIA, economic research for what is that? ASEAN and East Asia. So to our knowledge partners, IIGF Institute, Deloitte, Deloitte Advisory, Deloitte Consulting, and Deloitte Legal. Ibu Ira is here. Nusantara Infrastruktur, Hutama Karya, and Samuel Sekuritas, Pak RC is here. And also to our other partners, thank you so much for this closing events of the whole process of task force. We still have one more session, which is very interesting and exciting, at least for us. It's going to be pre-G20 Summit in Harvard University, which will be organized second week of October. You're all certainly welcome, using your own expense, of course, to be there. And we will be closing and bridging again the distance, if you like, as Nicolas mentioned, between ideas developed during the T20 events and T20 exercise. B20 will also be there, but most importantly, our Honorable Ministry of Finance, Ibu Sri Mulyani, will be there. I hope Pak Bambang could also join us at Harvard University in second week of October to deliver the final message before the summit. And the time is also very critical because it will be held back-to-back with the World Bank IMF fall meeting. So I'll see you in Harvard University, hopefully. Start saving your dates and also saving your money if you need. And also try to find a visa. It's going to be difficult for non-US residents. So save your time now. And once again, thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.